And international is one of those things you're either in or you're dabbling, or you've spent a ton of money and you haven't seen the ROI, or you're making mistakes, or there's that one board member that says we have to do this, and so you're putting money into it, you haven't seen anything coming back, or everybody knows you're supposed to be in China, and so you're in China and you're like, what are we doing in China? So I'm telling you, I've seen it all over the gamut, and everybody is at different phases with this, and everybody's still trying to find the ROI, but we know we're supposed to do it. And so there's a lot of lessons learned in the room. So I kind of throw that to you. Where are you in this phase? You may be all in, you may be about half in, or you may be just broaching it, or feel that you're just broaching it. And what has the ROI been, and where's the pressure? I mean, is there still pressure? We got to do more. It's more and more and more.
Well, Gary's, I think, further along than we are at IFT, but we do have members from, about 20% of our members are from outside of the United States, and 20% of our attendees for our annual conference come from outside of the U.S. But we struggle in this area with focus, and I think that we're about to embark upon a process with a consultant to really help us identify where the real opportunities are, because we spend a lot of time sending leaders and staff around the world to speak for 45 minutes or a half hour at conferences, and it's a huge investment. Sometimes it's where the leader would like to go, as much as about the value of the conference itself or what the return will be to IFT. So our hope, and our board actually agrees with this, because I had the opportunity to be at a board meeting just before I started where they had a significant conversation around what is really our global strategy. We say we're a global organization. We identified some targets 6 years ago, but those aren't really, we're not using, as Harrison said, that disciplined use of resources. And so they are in agreement that we need to have a plan. And so we are working with a consultant to do a lot of analysis about the food business in these various countries, and then identify, are there opportunity, or create a matrix, so to speak, of, is this a good membership opportunity? Is it a good education certification opportunity? Is this, and then the list of where we don't need to go because there's not that opportunity. And then hopefully we can get our board to agree to that and create that discipline around, even if the conference is in, a very exotic location where someone's not been, that we're not going to go there. We are the biggest organization. There are a lot of food science organizations around the world, and they want that association with us. But spending $10,000 plus on a trip for a 45-minute presentation about IFT is not going to get us the return. So it's still a challenge for us. We're not where we need to be, but at least we have the board acknowledging that we need to change how we're doing it.
I think even better than that, you've got the board acknowledging they haven't got a clue, so they hired consultants to come in and help them with this. So I think that's probably a great strategy right there to get it going. Do you want to?
Yeah, we talked
Sounds got a good story, actually.
ASAE, and then I mean, Christie's right. I think Gary has probably a more informed international strategy or developed than ASAE does. So what we did is we basically, about 5 years ago, looked at the international space and kind of decided what it is we want to do and what it is we don't want to do. And we decided what we don't want to do is go out and try to get members, because if they're engaged in the association community in Singapore, they're going to pay their dues or belong to the Singaporean Association and not ASAE anyway. So we viewed that if we have any sweet spot at all on the international stage, it's distribution of content and knowledge. So that was our focus. Not a lot of focuses, just one focus. Then the second thing we did is we hired an outside firm to come in and really handicap the world, if you will, and look at it on a global basis and say, okay, where does it make the most sense for ASAE to distribute content, and in what priority? Because we can't distribute content in 5 different places. We have to pick 1 or 2, and then we can expand on that if we want to. And so we did that, and then we committed resources to it. and the board agreed to the strategy. And it's a long-tail strategy. It's not a one-year strategy. It's a 5 to 10-year strategy. And we're embarking on that. We're about 3 years into it right now. We're not making money on a net basis, but we're not losing a lot of money like we did the first year. So the third year in, it's not revenue neutral, but it's progressing. And the other thing we found out is that if you've seen one part of the world, you've seen that part of the world.
Right.
So what happens in South America doesn't happen in China in the same way. What happens in China doesn't happen in Europe the same way, and vice versa. So you need a different strategy for wherever you're going to decide to do your work. And so that's pretty much the strategy that we're embarking on right now. And candidly, in a $40 million budget, we're devoting less than $1 million to that strategy. But nonetheless, we do have a strategy going forward, and it's a pretty focused strategy.
Well, not that it's going to convey to the group here, but I'd be interested, what areas did they decide would be best for ASAE? And again, this isn't going to convey necessarily, but
the best market for us, number one, was South Korea. Number one, they like us. And number two, they like English. And number three, they have a lot of economic ties between the U.S. and South Korea. So, and that's proven to be a good strategy for us. The second area was and is China, and really China has been much more of a struggle. And the reason they picked China is simply because the opportunity is there. It's just huge. A place that you might think we should go but are not going is India, because basically they don't like to spend money. And so we're not going to convince them to spend money, so we're not going to bother going there. And South America is not developed enough yet in the association space. Industry-wide, there's a lot of industry. Obviously, Brazil's a huge economy, but from an association perspective, it's a very immature market. And Europe is frankly hard because the European Union, each country has their own association. The EU is really not well formed in terms of associations, and so it's a struggle to figure out where you want to put resources in Europe. And frankly, they're a little bit snobby about it as well. If it's not in French, they're not going to read it. If it's not in Spanish, they can't read it.
That makes me snobby, because I can't speak any of those languages.
And it's just it's little things. So I think it's you have to figure out where you want to put your what baskets you want to put your eggs in, and then carefully lay those eggs.
Now I think that's helpful, actually. I think to see what a strategy is at that level can be helpful. Gary, give us.
I actually think John and ASAE have it right. And I just rotated off John's board, so I have a little bit more insight on that. But the idea that you have to have a specific strategy relative to your top 3, 4, or 5 targets. There's no one set strategy. You don't go after the whole world. You've got to really focus your resources. And I'm not going to bore you with our tale of experimentation in this area, other than to say, you understand the world of capital investment. It's a global world. And last year a Chinese company bought Smithfield Ham here in the United States. Every day a U.S. company invests somewhere in the world. But that concept doesn't necessarily then mean the association will be successful in doing what it's doing just because the industry or the profession happens to be a global thing. Now, we have about 10% of our members are outside of the U.S. Half of those are from Canada, half of those from everywhere else. About 10% of our convention comes from outside of the U.S. We have spent over the last 30 years upwards, I would say, of $5 million, probably more, and had very precious little to show for it, frankly. Over the last few years, we have reined it all in, and so now it's more or less revenue neutral. Some years a little bit more, some years a little bit less. But what I've learned, not only in our case and watching ASAE and others, is of all the areas of association life and strategy making, international is probably the trickiest, most prone to, not abuse, but prone to exaggerated aspirations, exaggerated amounts of investment, that the old showing the flag thing. Well, we have to go show the flag because we're the American Association. We take a delegation of 10 people over to South Africa for 2 weeks. It's really expensive, and there's precious little to show for it often. Now, some associations have done very well, and those are the groups that have licensure, certification-related content or education, and they've made it into a real business. Mm-hmm. And if there's one piece of advice other than saying you've got to have a strategy for each country, each market, and you've got to make sure you have the resources, and that is to make very clear what your business objectives are and set go, no-go milestones along the way. Because international is one of those things that it is very hard to claw back from. Once your volunteer leaders are out there showing the flag and they're hailed on stage at in front of 10,000 people, and they get to make the big speech and they get to meet the ministers and all that sort of thing, it's really hard to get that genie back in the bottle. Mm-hmm. So, it's just
but there's a test that we use, which you can tell, which gauges the importance of it. Number one is the country who's inviting you or the organization inviting you to speak internationally willing to pay for the transportation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If the answer to that is no, that's a big red flag. Yeah. Okay. And then the second question is to the individual who is invited, okay, are you willing, is it worth your time to spend your money to go? And if the answer to that is no, then we just don't go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you can throw a lot of money at this very, very quickly, and then it's politically hard to
it adds
walk
up
back.
quick.